Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the BANT Student Webinar Series. Today's topic is The Nutrition Gap by Amanda Williams. Before we get started, I just wanted to let you know a bit of the logistics of what's going to happen. The presentation will be available at the end of the webinar, and a link will be emailed to everyone. Okay. Also, if you wish to ask questions, please do so by clicking on the Q&A section in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. All questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. Okay, so let me start by introducing Amanda. Amanda Williams is a member of BANT and CNHC. She is the MD of Cytoplan, Technical Director of Nature's Own, and has worked in health-related fields for most of her working life. Firstly in veterinary medicine, and then in animal nutrition, and for a while as a homeopath. During her homeopathic training, she observed and heard many others say that very often the correctly prescribed homeopathic remedy, although expected to be curative, was palliative in effect. This set her thinking along the lines of obstacles to cure, during which time she became aware of the importance of nutrition in health and was alerted to the widespread nutrient depletion in the soils of the world and its implications for the world's population as a whole. This discovery led her to a desire to know more about nutritional therapy and her wonderful job at Cytoplan, where for the last 9 years she has been the managing director. She firmly believes that a lack of essential nutrients is one of the most common, prevailing and maintaining causes in acute, recurrent and chronic degenerative disease, and one of the most preventable. So without further ado, please let me welcome Amanda Williams.
Hi, thank you very much indeed. Good morning, everyone. Just a tiny little bit about Cytoplan now, and I won't labour on this too heavily, but thanks for the wonderful introduction. Cytoplan is a science-based company exclusively supplying the need of healthcare professionals and their patients. The company's been going for 22 years. It's a British-owned company, wholly owned by a charitable foundation called the AIM Foundation, and if you Google that, you'll find out all about their activities. All our profits go to charitable activities. We supply a comprehensive range of supplements for practitioners. Food state and whole food nutrients are unique to us. My beliefs, which are now in the main supported by science, is that nutritional deficiencies lie at the heart of most diseases. Nutrition is one of the most modifiable factors in health. There is also a nutrition gap in the population, which has been created by many factors, but the net result is that most people are not getting the nutrients they need for health on a daily basis. So a little bit of an overview of the nutrition gap. Nutritional satiety is fundamental to good health. The human body requires a daily intake of nutrients, food nutrients, to meet its physiological needs. The nutrition gap, which is what we're here today to explore, is responsible for the increase in many of the chronic degenerative diseases of today. Nutrients from food, or those with the same structure, are the only ones that effectively meet the metabolic demands of the human physiology and hence can fill the nutrition gap. Recent research concludes that isolated nutrients, these are standard BP isolates, do not always have the same effect as food nutrients. And the reason for this is a very simple law of nature, that different structures have different functions. Food nutrients have a complex structure that fits into normal metabolic pathways. Isolated nutrients have a different atomical structure that's not always recognized as food and can be seen by the body as a foreign and not necessarily beneficial substance. Let me give you an example of this. In nature and in food, Vitamin C is a very complex molecular structure containing not just ascorbic acid, one of the actives, but also flavonoids, flavones, esters, and a whole array of other associated food factors, a complex structure. If you ingest vitamin C in food, it is retained by the body. It's the flavones and the flavonoids that direct the function of ascorbic acid into retention mechanisms unless it's needed immediately. If you ingest ascorbic acid, the most commonly sold form of vitamin C, an isolated single molecule, it is rapidly excreted, normally within 2 hours of ingestion. That doesn't mean it doesn't do any good, but what it means is the body doesn't recognize it as food. It does not have the same total function, and that's really part of the principle that I'm going to be talking about today. The nutrition gap is the difference between the nutrients we're ingesting from an average UK diet and those deemed necessary for health and protection. And most of the research and data here is taken from work by Dr. Paul Clayton and his book Health Defence, if you've come across that at all, where he reviewed over 4,000 studies to come up with the levels of nutrients we need for optimum health. So we have two tables here. We have vitamins and we have minerals. The left-hand side are the nutrients that are essential for health on a daily basis, and these are micronutrients, not your macro protein, carbohydrate, fats, the micronutrients. The middle column is what we get from an average good UK diet. The green column is what we need for optimum health. RDAs go out of the window. RDAs are not the levels we need for optimum health. RDAs are simply sufficient to prevent overt deficiency states, but way short in most cases of the levels needed for optimum health. The orange column is the nutrition gap. These are the levels between the levels the average person is ingesting and the amounts that are needed for optimum health. The right-hand column, the blue column, just as a perspective on it, is the levels that are safe for supplementation. So as a principle, if you use supplements that contain the levels in the orange column, you are always going to be safe, you're always going to be effective, way short of upper safe, but well sufficient to be very efficacious pretty much with everyone in the population. If we have a little look at, sorry, flicked the wrong slide, look at some of the nutrients within this. It's probably just worth pointing out we've got vitamins and minerals in the left-hand column. Also, as you go towards the bottom, we've got DHA, EPA, omega-3 fatty acids, big area of deficiency among the population, flavonoids, carotenoids, the colourful pigments in fruit and vegetables, phytonutrients. Because the intake of fruit and vegetables is so depleted, which we'll look at later, this is a big area of deficiency. And beta-glucan. Beta-glucan's interesting. It's a polysaccharide that used to be contained in large quantities in ancestral diets. Beta-glucans are the little brown spots you see on apples or the slight moulding on the outside leaves of fruit of plants, vegetables that you eat. They're no longer ingested. Supermarkets take them off. They pick out the fruits that look absolutely perfect. And the result of this is that our diet is very short of beta-glucan. Beta-glucan's effect is that it works with the innate immune system. It helps prime it so the immune system is alert and activated. If we don't have sufficient beta-glucan, then our immune systems are quite sluggish, and this is probably something that most of you have noticed today, particularly with patients. Our immune systems don't act as quickly as they should. If one is ingesting a reasonable level of beta-glucan, then that isn't the case. The immune system's very quick to respond and get hold of viruses before they replicate sufficiently to cause symptoms. So if we just have a look at a couple of the nutrients within this table, selenium, for instance, is a very, very important nutrient for health. It is responsible for glutathione peroxidase, very responsible for membrane stability and integrity and antiviral activity. most people are selenium depleted. And the reason for that is that world soils are selenium depleted, apart from a couple of pockets. One's in Senegal, the other's in Norfolk. But other than that, the selenium is very depleted in the soil. It's worth just knowing that viruses mutate in selenium deficient hosts. Bird flu came out of a village or an area called Qishan in China, where the people are so selenium depleted. There's a disease called Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a disease that is very unique to that area, and it is purely a disease of overt selenium deficiency, where the babies are born and die very, very shortly after birth. But the people in that area are getting 29 micrograms per day of selenium, and it's worth just looking at this table and realizing the average person in the UK population, unless they're supplementing, is only getting 35. So that's really significant. World Health data tells us we need 3 to 4 micrograms per kilogram per day of selenium for health. So most people are short on average by somewhere between 120 150 micrograms per day. Just as a point here, it's worth looking at supplements when you're prescribing them and looking at the level of selenium. Most supplements that I observe are quite low in selenium, but obviously it's a key nutrient, and if you really want to give people the nutrients they need for health, it's important not just to give the nutrients, but also to give them at the levels they need. Another one that's probably quite interesting to point out, it's one of the lower areas of deficiency, is calcium. Doctors are telling ladies every day they need to supplement with 1200 milligrams of calcium for osteoporosis, and osteoporosis is now at epidemic proportions. Not only just because calcium is just one factor in bone health, but if you look here, most people really aren't very depleted in calcium. The average diet, probably because there's a lot of food fortification of calcium, is giving somewhere between 800 and 950 milligrams of calcium a day. So the shortfall, it says here 33 to 63, it's probably no more than about 150 milligrams per day in the average person. So calcium deficiency isn't something we have to worry about hugely. We do have to worry about magnesium deficiency, zinc deficiency, other factors in this respect that are involved in bone health. But I think the important thing to say with these tables is, as you can see, most people are short of all or most of the essential nutrients on a daily basis. You can also see how far away the upper safe levels are. So if you stick with a nutrition gap type approach, use the levels in the orange column, you're always going to be safe and it's always going to be appropriate. So the sum total of this is that in the Western world, there are nutrient deficiencies in every group of the population. And this was data from the Scientific Advisory Committee on Nutrition, who did a massive survey in 2009. This is a body that reports to the government on health. And they also said and revealed most depleted are those who need most, the elderly, pregnant ladies and children. The World Food Programme stated in 2007, and often sufferers are unaware as there are no visible warning signs, but the consequences are disastrous: mental impairment, poor health and productivity, susceptibility to a whole host of chronic degenerative diseases, even death. And this isn't something that's just in third world countries, this is us as well. 1 in 3 people in the UK are affected. The reasons for the nutrition gap. Well, one of the biggest factors is that our physiology evolved when we were hunter-gatherer man in Paleolithic days, some 40,000 years ago. At that time, we were very active beings, or hunter-gatherers were very active beings. They were ingesting on average 4,000 kilocalories of food per day, and they needed every bit of that just for the level of activity they had. But this isn't just 4,000 kilocalories of macronutrients, fat, protein, carbohydrates. It's also the level of micronutrients that was contained in 4,000 kilocalories of food a day. And also it's just worth realizing that the food in that era was a lot more nutrient dense than the food is today. Today, in the main, we're sedentary beings. We're ingesting about somewhere around 1,800 kilocalories per day, up to about 2,500 for men. And even that's too much for a lot of people. But hence you can see immediately there's a 50% shortfall in micronutrients that would be in the 4,000 kilocalories. I think that's one of the biggest factors in the nutrition gap. Food choices are obviously another factor. A lot of people are eating a lot more processed and fast foods. These are nutrient depleted or nutrient devoid. That's another factor. Food growing, the way we grow our food, process it and prepare it. When we grow food now, modern agriculture primarily uses nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium as a fertilizer. That returns only 3 nutrients to the soil. Growing plants will take up all the nutrients in the soil, which has the potential to be 67. Nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium are the 3 that will allow plants to grow very quickly. They wouldn't live long with not having the rest, but because they're cut and eaten in early stages, that doesn't become apparent. But hence, most plants are very depleted in most of the other nutrients that it takes up, but are not returned to the soil. Transporting tends to make water-soluble vitamins go out of foods, and processing strips the minerals. White bread contains absolutely none of the minerals that would be naturally occurring in the wheat at a starting place. The nutrient content of the freshly grown food, so we've got NPK replenishing the soil, that's one big factor. Another factor here is, I don't know if you know what mycorrhiza are. Mycorrhiza are a soil fungus that biotransforms inorganic minerals that are in the soil, like calcium carbonate, which is chalk, biotransforms it into a way that it can be taken up by growing plants. Mycorrhiza is destroyed by NPK. It's also destroyed by deep ploughing. So the mycorrhiza, when that is not in the soil, it means the minerals are left bound in the soil, not available for plants to take them up. That's a factor, a big factor. Luckily, there are some areas of farming where they're using calcified seaweed, which has a far greater nourishment. They also appreciate in those people, particularly people who are trying to get organic farms going, deep ploughing is a factor that is debilitating to plant growth, so that in some areas, luckily, is being ruled out. Loss of rotational growing. The old system of agriculture used to use rotational growing, nitrogen fixing crops, years where fields were allowed to be fallow so that soil could be replenished. In the main, that isn't happening today, and this is the reason that world soils are so depleted. Our individual ability to assimilate nutrients. Poor dentition, not chewing our food enough, stress, dysbiosis, that's disrupted digestion, medications, aging, all of these factors deplete our ability to make good use of the nutrition in food. Lifestyle factors such as smoking, alcohol, exercise, sun exposure, stress, all increase our nutrient needs. Smoking, if we just look at smoking, if you smoke, I don't think you can ever ingest sufficient vitamin C to combat the damage and the free radical load that smoking produces. Exercise, of course, is another factor because we're told to exercise, and exercise is really good, but you need to be aware if you're upregulating metabolic activity, you're also producing more free radicals, so that increases antioxidant needs. One of the biggest or another of the biggest influences on the nutrition gap is the shift of foods we now consume. 60 to 100 years ago, our diets were primarily plant-based. Now they're primarily animal-based. Plant foods are high in protective nutrients. Animal foods are calorie dense and contain few protective nutrients. If we look at this table here, you'll see this. If we take 500 kilocalories of plant-based food versus 500 kilocalories of animal-based food, you can see the difference in the content. Cholesterol, for instance, is absolutely nil in plant-based foods. Animal-based foods, it's high. Okay, I think cholesterol probably isn't the huge problem it's made out to be, but still you can see if you're ingesting 2,500 kilocalories of animal-based foods, whatever, you are going to have too much cholesterol. So that's a factor of consideration. Fat. Animal foods are very much higher in fat, and of course it's saturated fat. Plant-based foods are low and it's polyunsaturated, so it's not only the level, but it's also the type of fat that's significant. Protein levels are very similar, but protein in plant-based foods is a much more complex molecular structure, much slower to break down, gives far better satiety, and is longer acting. One of the most significant things is if you look at the yellow highlighted areas, beta-carotene, vitamin C, vitamin E. These are antioxidant protective nutrients contained in plant-based foods, which are pretty much non-existent in animal-based foods. Magnesium, certainly I notice most of the population are magnesium depleted, and a lot of nutritional therapists will tell you the same. And you can see one of the reasons for it. Plant-based foods high in magnesium, animal-based foods very, very low. And of course the stresses of today are another factor in that, because it increases our needs. It's quite interesting as well. Plant-based foods high in calcium, animal-based foods not quite so low as you might expect, because there's a lot of animals are fed calcium in mineral licks and things, so they're not as low as they might otherwise be. But still, that's another reason probably people on animal-based diets are lower in calcium than those on plant-based diets. The 5-a-day message has been wheeled out from government bodies for the last 15 years at the cost of millions and millions of pounds. 95% of our protective nutrients are found in our 5-a-day. Unfortunately, since the inception of the message, the mean average intake of fruit and veg across the population hasn't changed at all. Each portion of fruit and veg we consume gives us around 20% of our antioxidant needs. And this is sadly what's happening. None of the groups are having, on average, 5 portions of fruit and veg a day. The most recent data is that 5 is just a starting place. Antioxidant status, which is thought to be in a linear relationship with health, goes up in a linear line. So the more portions of fruit and veg a day you have, the higher antioxidant status, the greatest your chances of health. So you can see here that not one of the groups is getting what they need. The over 50s are the best off, probably because that was just post-war days when the parents were still cooking at home, the mother was still at home, it was still a case of vegetables, homegrown. The meals were better then, that was just before the era of fast food. What you can also see is that Victorian era, where there were none of the chronic degenerative diseases that plague our population, that are directly related to nutritional deficiency. None of them existed then, and that is worth noting. The other thing that's really significant is the young people are the worst off. Some of the young are eating no fruit and veg at all. And the frightening thing is that there are diseases that previously only occurred in the elderly that are now occurring in young people, and this is due to nutritional deficiency. I don't know if you know of a condition called age-related macular degeneration. That was so named because it previously only occurred in people over 65 years old. It's now occurring in people over 20. I was at a meeting of the Macular Degeneration Society in Worcester about 2 years ago, and a lady in the audience said that her friend had had a baby who'd been born with macular degeneration. Macular degeneration is a disease purely of deficiency, shortage of lutein and zeaxanthin, but lutein and zeaxanthin are carotenoids found in dark green vegetables. The macula and retina need 6 milligrams per day for health. The average mean intake of lutein across the population is 1 milligram a day. So there you can see why we've got the problem. Since 1950, there have been large increases in obesity, dementias, hypertension, pre-hypertension, age-related macular degeneration, osteoporosis, asthma, gastrointestinal disorders, type 1 diabetes, ADHD, ADD dysphasia, non-tobacco related cancers, 100% increase. All these diseases are diseases of nutritional deficiency. All have long latency periods. The symptoms might suddenly appear, but the pathology develops for years or decades ahead of the symptoms. Most apparently healthy people are pre-ill. 5 out of 6 60-year-olds have one or more of the chronic diseases that prevail: heart disease, arthritis, osteoporosis, Alzheimer's, or cancer. The onset of all are triggered by shortage of metabolically essential nutrients. The onward progression is similarly hastened where shortfalls persist, and modulated or checked when the levels are increased. There is no shortage of evidence. I've produced for you a couple of slides here which give studies, just a few of the studies around today, which shows there's no shortage of evidence that nutrients prevent disease. And I'll tell you what, it's just so great that the food companies now have got a vested interest, particularly with fortified food and things like that. There's now being a lot of research done on food actives and the benefit to health, and that's wonderful because it's making the population aware of how important it is to eat a good diet and the actives that are contained in food. So there's a few of the studies you might like to look at in your own time. So what can we do? We know that there are nutrient deficiencies among every group of the population, but we need to put a strategy into place for helping people. I do think it's really, really important to look at food first. Supplements will always help, even if people aren't eating a good diet, but it's not morally right. One has to try and get people to improve their diet, and that really is the first place to start. The first thing to do is to encourage people to increase their intake of fruit and vegetables. At least 5 portions a day is what to aim at. If they can do more, that's absolutely wonderful. The people that are only eating 1 portion a day, just try and get them up to 3 for starters. Certainly, my experience is if you overface people, they don't do anything. So make it manageable for them. And something that's really, really good that can be very easily applied to most people, even if they're not prepared to change the majority of their diet. And actually, statistically, the thing that people change least and last is their diet. So it is a problem that we are carrying with us in our profession. You can suggest people mix up a smoothie for breakfast that contains, you can very easily get 5 portions of fruit and veg into a breakfast smoothie that tastes absolutely delicious. And if you can get them to add a superfood such as chlorella or spirulina, that'll really boost the nutritional value of that. And in fact, what they do the rest of the day won't matter so much. So that's just something to bear in mind. It's an easy way. It's easy. Most people will enjoy it. Most people can manage it. Also use multivitamins and minerals to supplement, to bridge the nutrition gap. Now in this respect, the success of your prescription will rest on ensuring it contains TLC. I've put those letters in just to make it easy for you to remember. It is tender loving care because obviously that's all, that's how we work. But the totality, if we look down what TLC stands for, T means totality. The totality of nutrients needed by your patient must be covered in the formulation at the level that is needed for that person. The nutrition gap level is a very good starting place, and the nutrients should be in the correct form. Nutrients need to be in a bioeffective form to be effective. Different structures have a different function, as we saw earlier on. So a well-designed supplement program is one that provides all the nutrients a person needs for health, the totality, at the correct levels, in the correct forms. The totality must be vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, flavonoids, carotenoids, those are food phytonutrients, omega-3, for each individual person that you're seeing. If you are in doubt about what that person needs, but you use the levels that I've listed in the nutrition gap approach, that will always be a very safe, a very good starting place. And if you then reassess that person in 5 to 6 weeks, you will notice a beneficial difference. And also at that point, it'll make it a little bit more obvious about the other things that might still be missing. And bioeffective form. So I'm saying I think it's a really good idea if you use nutrients that are food fortified, food state, whole food, nutrients in the same form as those in food will be optimally bioeffective. The reason here is that if they are in the same form as food, they will follow food metabolic pathways. The body has intrinsic recognition and signaling to make optimal beneficial outcome of nutrients that are in food. And this is a very simple law of nature. When our physiology evolved, it's a condition for survival that we have evolved over eons to make to use beneficially the things that are naturally occurring. It's quite interesting also to note here that our immune system is designed to act against foreign protein substances. Viruses and bacteria are protein structures, and our immune system is designed to protect us and mount a response against foreign protein particles. We have an acquired tolerance of proteins that were around in food at the time our physiology developed. And that might make it immediately apparent to you why some proteins in foods now are a problem to a lot of people, particularly food processing, whereby substances such as wheat have got a very delicate protein structure. It's very rapidly and easily changed by processing. Then it becomes a foreign structure that our body doesn't necessarily recognize as beneficial. So what I'm really saying is that if you have substances in the same form as food, they will have an optimal beneficial metabolic outcome. If they're not in that form, they may not have the same outcome, and they're also likely to be rapidly excreted, as we saw earlier on with vitamin C. There are exceptions to this rule, which I have to say it's probably only in the last 2 years I've become aware of this, and it's probably a mark of, unfortunately, the sort of dysfunction in a lot of our physiology today. One is cyanocobalamin. Cyanocobalamin is vitamin B12, as it occurs in plants, as it occurs in nature. It's become apparent that particularly people with errors of detoxification, that would be the main group, aren't able to detoxify the cyan component, which is cyanide, of cyanocobalamin. Cobalamin is the B12 component, and it means that these people don't do well on cyanocobalamin from food. If it's ingested from food, it's not a problem because the levels in food are very, very low. But if it's given in high levels in supplements, it can be a problem to those people. The ideal form is methylcobalamin, and it's also beneficial for a lot of people that have genetic errors of methylation. So this is why methylcobalamin is a particularly good form of vitamin B12, and in fact that is the form that the minute this information became apparent to me, I put into our supplements. I will also say here that I'm also becoming aware that the form hydroxycobalamin, which is another form of B12 not found in food, is beneficial for certain people who have what's called methyl trapping, which is an error of methylation, which is sort of needs to be the subject of a whole different talk, but maybe if you can just bear that in mind if ever you come across this. So hydroxycobalamin or methylcobalamin, in my opinion, are the choice forms of vitamin B12 to give. Neither of these are found in food. Methylation is a process that only occurs in the human body, which is why you're not going to find methylated nutrients in food. But it's just one area where food nutrients may be not always the best in certain people. Another is pyridoxal 5-phosphate. That is the reduced and metabolically active form of vitamin B6. Vitamin B6 occurs in nature as pyridoxine, and not everyone is able to convert it to pyridoxal 5-phosphate. So I feel that since it's quite difficult to detect those people, it's probably best to give B6 in the form of P5P, pyridoxal 5-phosphate, because then it'll be beneficial in everyone. And the other one that's particularly interesting is methylfolate, folic acid, and folate. Folate in food occurs as taurine L-glutamate. The most commonly given supplemental form of folate is folic acid. The form that the body uses best is methylfolate. Three totally different structures of what would appear to be the same substance. I can touch very quickly that in my opinion folic acid is not a good substance to give. There is a lot of evidence that certain groups of the population, those with errors of methylation and the elderly, do not do well on folic acid. It can act as a procarcinogen. It can be a toxic substance in those people. There are people who don't methylate folate. But folic acid is a substance that is very important to protect against cancer. It's also a growth promoter, but it has to be in the right form. As folic acid, it can promote growth where there shouldn't be growth, which is why it can be a procarcinogen in certain people. Methylfolate, because it's recognized by the body as a necessary substance, is also regulated by the body. The body will only take it up and convert the level that is needed. It will not promote growth where growth is not needed. So, in my opinion, methylfolate is by far the best form of folate, folic acid to give. And the minute this data became apparent, I did put that substance in all my products. The other thing to bear in mind is that folate from food, although it isn't very well converted, we don't need high levels. If you look at ancestral data, we were getting about 5 milligrams of folate in food. We were only converting about 100 micrograms. At that level, circulating in the bloodstream, it is wholly safe. The problem is when it gets into higher levels, as it can do with high-dose folic acid, it overrides cancer recognition factor. But if it's in a form where that's regulated or it's ingested from food, the body will only convert the amount that's needed. It's probably for that reason, that the human dehydrofolate reductase enzyme, which is the enzyme that converts folate from food to a form that it can then be reduced and carried around the bloodstream, is very inefficient. It will only convert small levels. But the reason for this slide, I've said up to date, food natural is always best. There are some exceptions to that rule, and probably as time goes on there will become more exceptions. I've put in a slide about excipients because I often get asked about excipients, and I just thought it was good to have a perspective on them. In an ideal world, you wouldn't want excipients in supplements. I don't know if you know, I'm sure you do know, but excipients are materials that are categorically or meant to be inert. They are used to help supplements be made. They can be flow ingredients, they can be compression ingredients. They're ingredients that help nutritional actives be put into a supplemental form, such as tablets or capsules. There is a lot of bad press about certain excipients. The first one on the list, for instance, magnesium stearate. Certainly when I read the bad press, I took it out of all my products, and I think if it can be avoided, it is certainly best avoided. But just to sort of bring it into a balanced situation, magnesium stearate is never used at more than 1% of total inclusion. So if you've got a tablet of 1,000 milligrams, which would be a pretty average tablet size, 1% of that is 10 milligrams. It's a very, very small amount. But then again, the adverse side of that would be if there are people taking 7 or 8 supplements a day, all with magnesium stearate in, then the level increases, and then it just probably does tip balances into being too much. So certainly best avoided, and I notice a lot of supplement manufacturers are removing it from their products, but it is a very effective excipient, which is why a lot of them will continue to use it. Calcium stearate has a very similar action to magnesium stearate. Doesn't have quite the bad press, but again, actually it's not quite as efficient as magnesium stearate, so it's often put in slightly higher levels. So that's just a thing to be mindful of. Dicalcium phosphate, that's another one that's had bad press. Used in very, very minute amounts. That would probably be used at about 0.5% of inclusion, but it's a very good flow agent. So if you've got ingredients you're trying to get into a capsule that are sticky and are not flowing, dicalcium phosphate really helps enable that process. Hydroxypropyl methylcellulose sounds like the worst of the lot, and it sounds like a horrible chemical, but in fact this is the most harmless of them all. Most capsule shells containing vegetable cellulose are made from hydroxypropyl methylcellulose. That is synonymous with vegetable cellulose. It is a pure vegetable ingredient and totally harmless. So if you see that on labels, could also be HPMC, don't worry, that really is harmless. Sodium carboxymethylcellulose, again, sounds horrible, pretty harmless. It's either vegetable fibre or wood pulp, again used in very small amounts, but it's used to ensure supplements break down where they should break down in the body, in the small intestine, or wherever that particular one should break down. Other than that, if a supplement doesn't break down where it should do, then it just goes through the body and it's just totally non-effective. So this is just a breakdown ingredient to ensure that certain ingredients that might otherwise not break down are released where they need to be released. And vegetable stearic acid, you'll see that on a lot of labels, is an emulsifying and solubilizing agent. Again, you can see why it has its purpose, and that is going to be in a lot of supplements. So yes, ideal, and in an ideal world, and certainly I am aspiring to remove all the excipients I can from all my products, but it isn't always possible. The key features that set food state, whole food nutrients, and those others that are on the market in the same form are that they're presented to the body in the same form as the nutrients in food. They are then highly bioavailable in small doses, gentle and effective, even for those people who are ill or sensitive. They're also very safe, even in overdose. I thought I'd explain a little bit about the manufacturing process of our products. that are food state or whole food, just to give you a tiny bit of a perspective on how supplements are made. Our food state products are made via a proprietary process. Appropriate food bases are used for the renaturing of vitamins and minerals. Isolated nutrients are added in a growth medium, and the food base grows and uptakes the nutrients into its cellular matrix, and the resulting product is a fully food complexed, nutrient fortified food. Let me explain a little bit how we make our vitamin C. We use citrus pulp as one form of the bases that we use, because oranges and citrus are naturally high in vitamin C. A citrus pulp base, has receptor sites for 25% vitamin C. In perfect growing conditions, an orange would contain 25% of its weight as vitamin C, but most of the oranges that we find today contain much, much less than that, simply because the growing conditions are not ideal. However, it has the receptor sites for 25%, and hence it has that potential. So we use the base, we activate through enzymes the receptor sites that are unfulfilled, because the growing of that product hasn't been ideal to that point in time. We then feed the base in a growth medium ascorbic acid, and it will be taken up into the base, tissue metabolized, biotransformed into food complexed vitamin C with a complex molecular structure. The benefit of this process is it's consistent. We can have consistency of level of vitamin C in a product at any point in time. It's also a high level of vitamin C with all the other associated food factors in a small amount of material, but it's in the same form as it occurs in nature. It's immediately recognizable by the human body. So if I just go back to that process, in the growth process that we use infrared spectroscopy, which is a process that identifies all the receptor sites have been fulfilled, and once that has been flagged up, we can then stop the process, wash off all the materials that have been used in the process, which just leaves the nutrient dense base that's high in tissue metabolized vitamin C that is metabolized at cellular level. We then gently dry that, and that becomes our food state vitamin C product. Our other range incorporates hydroponically grown nutrients, otherwise known as hydromineral technology. Hydroponic growing is used widely in Holland. Most of the salad vegetables you'll see in supermarkets are hydroponically grown. The benefit of it is you've got a controlled environment free from soil bacteria, so it's very easy to keep a high level of quality control and consistency of product. The whole food minerals we use are made from a species of broccoli or species of brassica, which is a member of the broccoli family, called Brassica juncea, otherwise known as Indian mustard. It isn't eaten much today, but it is an edible cruciferous vegetable. The plant has got huge leaves, huge leaf vacuoles, the ability to uptake minerals at 2,000 times greater level than normal plants, which make it ideal for mineral enrichment in small quantities as needed in supplements. Okay, you don't want to eat 5 big platefuls of vegetable broccoli on a daily basis, so you can have the minerals that would be contained in one small capsule, and that's the great benefit of this particular species. The plants are grown in a mineral-rich water hydroponic growing environment that contains the levels of nutrients required in the finished product. So normally with a multivitamin and mineral, you have to mix, for instance, 33 different individual nutrients. And you can probably appreciate how difficult it is to get an even mix of some of those nutrients. This process means that we can put the minerals at the levels we want them in the finished product into the water. The plant takes them up at the level, so it's pre-mixed. We don't have to do any mixing. We analyze the leaf of the plant ongoing through the growing process, and the minute the levels that we need have been reached, we then stop the process, gently dry the leaves, and that's our finished products. We don't use the stalks of the plant because they could have free-flowing minerals in them, which would still be the mineral salts that were in the original solution. We just use the leaves where the nutrients have been tissue metabolized. I think time's getting a bit short, so I'll be quite quick on this one. So it's only biotransformed nutrients that are used from the leaf tissue, and the great benefit of this product or plant specifically is it's got a high level of naturally occurring GTF chromium. You might be aware there are very few forms of decent chromium on the market since the advent of the positive list, that's the EU supplements legislation. Most of the ones that had any GTF component weren't allowed, so this is why this is of particular benefit. It's the only GTF chromium product available, and you probably do know that chromium without GTF isn't going to be very beneficial in the body. It also contains naturally occurring vanadium. Vanadium is another mineral that has great benefit in the human body. In tiny amounts, it's a micronutrient. It's only needed in small amounts, but if we don't have it, it's a problem to us. It's very good at helping regulate blood sugar, and it also has other actions. It's contained naturally in this product. We don't have to put a vanadium declaration on the label because it isn't something that's added, but it is there, naturally occurring, and that has a benefit. The brassica species also contain other very valuable nutrients. Indole 3-carbonyl, sulforaphane, which are anti-cancer nutrients, also small quantities of cyanogens, which activate the lactoperoxide system, which is part of the innate immune system in the human body. So in short, the whole complex, the substrate and the added nutrients, are all beneficial to human health. Those are some of the studies that were done early on when these products were first produced on the market, and there is ongoing research, particularly with selenium. All the products we produce are manufactured in state-of-the-art facilities working to good manufacturing practice, GMP. That is the industry gold standard in that's the industry gold standard. We also use pharmaceutical level quality control as well. That means that every batch is analysed several times throughout the production and the finished product throughout its shelf life, and we keep batch samples from every batch of every product for 10 years. I'm only telling you this because this is something you should expect from your suppliers, and it's good for you to have that information because then you can ask the question to make sure other people are doing this. So just as a recap, you can have the best products, but there are still 3 essential prerequisites for a nutritional prescription to be successful. Back to TLC, totality of nutrients at the levels needed for beneficial outcome. Too low will not be of sufficient benefit. Too high will possibly give side effects. Let me give you a quick example of this. Magnesium is something that I often recommend for people who are having difficulty sleeping, usually at a level of about 2 magnesium citrate or 2 of our biofood magnesium, somewhere between 180 to 200 milligrams of elemental magnesium. People tend to think if a little's good, a lot must be better. So very often people will come back and say, well, I did take 2 and I was a lot better, but I thought I'd get even better if I took 5, and I couldn't sleep at all. Why not? And that's because at the right level, magnesium is a relaxer of smooth muscle. If you then take it at higher levels, it starts other processes, like it'll start the detoxification process in the body, which will then activate metabolic systems, which is why it then will not aid restful sleep. So what I'm saying is that the levels in any supplement need to be what is needed for the beneficial outcome that person needs. And the nutrients must be in a bioeffective form, the correct form. And that's really what we've said throughout this presentation. During my time here and in practice up to a couple of years ago, I would have pretty much said that if you give the nutrition gap approach to almost everyone as a population approach, you will always see benefit. I'd always been a little bit aware that there was always a very small percentage of the population for whom that didn't appear to be true. and you kind of always thought, well, maybe they're not doing what we've suggested they do. But I don't think that's the case anymore. I think that there are a very small percentage of people that have genes that increase their nutrient needs or impair pathways, and that means that these people need specialized nutritional programs beyond the nutrition gap. And this whole area, the emerging science of nutrigenomics, embraces the nutrition gap and takes it one step beyond. And I thought it was relevant to touch on that today. So what is nutrigenomics? While humans are very similar genetically, we all have slight differences in our genetic blueprint which set us apart from other people. Nutrigenomics combines the study of nutrition and genetics to discover the different ways people respond to foods based on their genetic makeup and the different needs some people have. What's the relevant to us? It'll help us tailor individual programs for prevention and health in a far more exacting way than ever before. So it embraces the nutrition gap, which is a population approach, and takes it on to a higher step in a very much more exacting, individualized way. Our individuality in health and disease are determined by our environment that hinges on nutrition and our genes. So the big picture, evolution. DNA is the digital information system that makes up our genes and provides codes for all life on this planet. Changes in DNA allow for natural selection and for evolution to occur as species evolve to better cope with changing environments. Subtle variations in the genes we inherit make us better able to adapt to specific environments. Small variations in the genetic code that have been passed down through generations are known as polymorphisms. These polymorphisms are largely responsible for our biochemical individuality. Most common polymorphisms affect a single nucleotide of the DNA and only one letter is changed. So let's have a look at this. So you've got DNA, you've got the proteins either side. Just 1/2 of one of the rungs of the ladder is changed to produce a SNP, a polymorphism. So where we've got red here, it could be blue, or where we've got yellow here, it could be green. That's what a SNP is. The key to understanding and using genomic information is to realize that every significant polymorphism exists because at some point in human evolution it provided an advantage for survival by enabling carriers to adapt better to specific environmental challenges. I had there the thrifty gene the other day, but I know that that's a little bit controversial. But the obesity gene is something that's been in the news recently and is definitely well substantiated. It's a gene that came from times of hardship, and it enabled the bearers to make a better metabolic outcome of foods that wouldn't normally be well digested, and also to hang on to calories and for fat not to be broken down. Now, in an environment where food is in short supply or in times of hardship, you can see the benefit. The problem is a lot of people in today's world, about 30% of us, carry that gene, and in times of plenty you can see why it's a problem. So every polymorphism is beneficial to health in the right environment and not so in the wrong environment. SNPs are fairly common. The average person has about 3 million, most of them insignificant. A polymorphism may alter the effect of a specific dietary component on a health outcome. A dietary component may alter the effect of a polymorphism on a health outcome. Dietary components act directly or indirectly to alter the impact of our genes on health, and that's through our gene expression, which I think needs to be the subject of a different talk. Nutrigenomics emphasizes the close cause-effect relationship between specific nutrients and nutritional regimes and how they act on an individual's genetic makeup and on the development of specific metabolic disorders. So basically, nutrigenomics tries to identify why the same food is good for one person, bad for another. One man's meat is another man's poison. There's quite interesting recent data, in fact it was the subject of a paper in Nature magazine, that gene expression of the offspring is altered irreversibly by the diet of the mother at the time of conception via the methylation of her genes. So that's how important diet is on not just our own health, but also on the health of our offspring. Gene methylation of DNA happens immediately at the time of conception, and it is wholly directed by nutrition. And this is to aid better survival in changing environments. So small changes in DNA are called polymorphisms. Most are insignificant, but some lead to higher risks of disease in different environments, particularly the modern environment and the lifestyles of today. Knowing a person's genetic profile enables personalized programs for individuals. The benefits for the many, the population. Adopting epidemiological guidelines such as the nutrition gap will produce epidemiological benefits, so benefit for the population as a whole. Modifying those epidemiological guidelines based on unique genomic information will produce additional benefits for individuals. Epidemiological data, like the benefits found from ingestion of a Mediterranean diet or the nutrition gap approach, gives us strong evidence of optimal nutrition for the average person. Hence, we can modify and improve for individuals who need more than the average person by using that information and combining it with information about their unique genetic profiles. Benefits for the individual: awareness that your genome is not your destiny. Knowledge of the susceptibility it creates enables individuals to make considered choices and become empowered in their own health. So I think it's a real benefit to know that the information is out there, it's easy enough to get, and it can help you make informed choices. It's also beneficial for proactive patients who want to minimize their risk of disease and optimize their health, particularly people who've got a family history of disease like heart disease, osteoporosis, cancer, where this knowledge can help them tailor appropriate nutrition diet modifications that might be greater needs than most people have. For instance, there's a polymorphism whereby the people who carry it have an inability to make good use of vitamin D. These people need 10 times more vitamin D than other people on a daily basis. You wouldn't give a normal person that level, but if this group of people don't have it, they are so susceptible to diseases of vitamin D deficiency. So that's where that knowledge is so useful for an individual. And also people who don't get better by traditional means that would normally be applied and that would normally help with those symptoms. So nutrigenomics in practice, it's a valuable tool to be aware of, particularly for those patients who don't get better by normal means, where there's a strong family history of disease and a patient wants to prevent it well in advance, for those people who want to know how to live commensurate with their genes, and it's useful for therapists to be aware of who it can help, how to apply it, and what your target audience might be. And I think that's me done.
Thank you very, very much, Amanda. That was absolutely brilliant, and I think gave us all a lot of food or supplements for thought. So thank you again. We do have some questions that we'd like to put to you.
Sure.
We've still got everyone still online, so obviously everyone has thought that it was the presentation was fantastic. So for that reason, we will go into some questions and keep it open for a bit longer. The first question I have is from Gemma. She says, "Please, could you talk a little bit about when the best time to take supplements is to get the most out of them? Should a multivitamin be taken with a meal to get the most absorption? And when is the best time to take omega-3 fish oil?"
Okay, there are certain nutrients that are better taken at different times of day, and that will be specific to the nutrient. For instance, I always feel magnesium is better taken in the evening because it enables sleep. Most nutrients I tend to advise are taken with food early in the day. If you take B vitamins and supplements that tend to upregulate metabolic activity, they're going to be better taken earlier in the day when you're active and not when you want to go to sleep at night. Food state whole food nutrients can be taken on an empty stomach because they have the associated food factors complete with them, but I still always feel it's better for things to be taken with food because then they just become part of the whole meal and go into the whole mix. Does that answer the totality of that question? Omega-3, I think, was part of that. Again, I think omega-3 should be taken at about lunchtime and taken with food because it will start digestive enzyme release, also bile flow. So again, that's better taken in the day when you're active and not taken at night.
Excellent, thank you. Another question is, I would like to read more about the nutrition gap. Can you direct me to good reading material?
I do think that Paul Clayton's book, Health Defense, is really, really valuable for this because he was the one that first flagged up nutritional deficiencies and the nutrition gap. He called it type 3 malnutrition, type B malnutrition, and that was micronutrient deficiency. The other area of work that's really good to look at is all the work that Bruce Ames has done in America and all his studies, because one of the great things he discovered was how the nutrients are used in a hierarchy in the human body. First of all, nutrients that are ingested go out to immediate fight and flight energy metabolism. They will only go into protective mechanisms if there's more than's needed for immediate use. So you can see that if you're ingesting what you need for health and just immediate needs, but you don't have that little bit extra, your protective systems will be the ones that fall short and aren't properly looked after. We've also got a book on the nutrition gap, which I'm really happy to let everyone have. Or anyone that wants it.
That would be great. How would we go about doing that?
Email me or just contact me with a list of people and I'm very happy to send it out. And that's got a whole list of references, which will also take you to other reading on the subject.
Fantastic. I'll talk to people about that in a moment. Another question is, would you favour non-organic fruit from veg in local farmers markets or organic fruit and veg sold in the supermarkets?
I think the data that's coming out is organic, non-organic. They might both be depleted in vitamins and minerals just because of the soil they're grown in. But one of the great benefits organic food has over and above non-organic food is it's going to be a lot higher in flavonoids and carotenoids. Flavonoids and carotenoids are compounds that protect us. They also are produced by plants to protect themselves from environmental threats. So effectively, the same way they protect plants, when we ingest the plants, they have the same protective capabilities in us. For instance, carotenoids help screen us from UV light, and they do the same for plants. Now, plants that are sprayed with pesticides and herbicides have no need to protect themselves, so they don't produce these compounds. So that is one area where organic is just way above non-organic. But I do hear what you say about locally grown, so I think that would go a long way, but I think you maybe just need to ask the question what pesticides and herbicides are used in the process.
Excellent. Okay, and can you repeat the best form of magnesium to aid sleep and the quantity?
I personally like magnesium citrate. Now that's quite a commonly sold form of magnesium. Most magnesium citrate you'll find at about 500 milligrams magnesium citrate, which gives 80 milligrams elemental magnesium, because obviously it's a complex. My experience is that 2 of those capsules about 2 hours before sleep will help most people.
Great.
So that's so I was just saying that's 1,000 milligrams of magnesium citrate, 160 milligrams elemental magnesium.
Fantastic. Okay. We have another question, which is how do we apply nutrigenomics in practice? Is there a test NTs can use, or is this a long way away still?
I'm in the process of talking to BANT at the moment about trying to produce a course or get someone to produce a course that will give people the awareness and or know enough about it to know how to apply it. You've probably all read about the test 23andMe, which is a saliva test that shows the genome of people that can be very easily and non-invasively done, and it's now available in this country. I think my own feeling, because I've worked quite a bit with this now, is that there's huge ethical issues involved. And I think it's really important that there is a course produced somewhere that therapists who are keen to use it or at least be aware of its application can understand the people it's appropriate for, application, ramifications, and how to work with it. There is a qualification in BANT, I think it's Nutrigenomic Counsellor, so it may well be worth going back to them to find out if they know what courses are available at this point in time. But certainly my aim is to try and produce something that would at least give people enough information to know how to use it safely and effectively.
That sounds great. And lastly, one more is, do you recommend any particular books for nutrigenomics?
No, I think I'd refer you back to BANT to ask about that at this point in time. My experience on it is still quite limited. It's still quite new to me. I mean, I know that BANT require you to do their functional medicine modules, so that would be a very good starting place. Sorry, I'll come
Eh,
back to you on it another day when I know more myself.
No problem. Fantastic. And just lastly, can you recommend any good studies on the obesity gene?
No, but if you email me, I'll email you back some. I just need to research that a little bit myself.
Okay, fantastic. So with all of that said, Amanda, we'll close up now, and I'd like to say thank you very, very much for all that wonderful information that you've given us. What we will do from now is we'll continue the discussion in the BANT Student Network on LinkedIn. So if you just go to LinkedIn and search for BANT Student Network, you'll get the group, and if you're not already a member of it, we'll continue to start discussions, and it's through there where we can coordinate copies of books and any other additional information that's required. And lastly, the next BANT student webinar will be on the thyroid and will be presented by Sue McGarrigle from BioNutri on the 9th of February 2015. So with that, again, Amanda, thank you for a tremendous presentation, loads and loads of information, and we look forward to continuing the discussion on the BANT Student Network on LinkedIn. Thank
Thank
you
you
again,
so
everyone,
much.
for your time. Sorry, Amanda.
I just say thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you, guys, and we'll see you next month. Take care.
Bye.